people to hell. I think that everyone should have mercy. Now, how do you answer that?
Do you think murderers should have mercy?
Thank you.
And that's a theoretical. Here's how I would do it. So I want to talk to you about Joe Smith. Joe Smith breaks into your mother's house tonight, rapes and tortures her for hours, and finally kills her horrifically. Dismembers her body and writes terrible messages in her blood across her house. And threatens that they are going to do the same thing to everyone she loves. And they catch Joe Smith. And Joe Smith comes in front of the judge. And you show that Joe Smith has intention of killing the rest of your family after the horrific act he's done. And the judge says to Joe Smith, I don't think that anyone should really have terrible punishment. They should be given mercy. You're free to go. Would you feel that that was fair? And at that point, how can the person answer that question? Do you see? But you see how I changed it from what about murder? That's a theoretical. Well, sure, I think murderers.
You speak to you get them to like, that's almost like an emotional
That's
connection.
exactly what it is.
Because if you just say a random murderer, they're like, eh.
Yeah,
But if you connect it to something.
Maybe.
personal, yeah.
maybe they deserve a second chance. But if you connect it to them personally, what about doctors that practice? Well, doctors do so much good. Okay, here's a doctor that you take your daughter into the ER, and you're desperate because she's turning blue, and he makes her sit there for 30 minutes while he talks with his colleagues, and then takes her in the back and says it's nothing serious, and 10 minutes later she codes and dies. What do you think should be done to that doctor?
Take his license.
Now suddenly it's not some theory, it's your daughter dead.
Yeah.
So by applying that, now, how do you do that? Whenever people, so if somebody raises the thing of karma, and maybe you don't know much about karma, ask questions. Well, how did you come to believe in karma? Well, I listened to Buddhism and, oh, really? What do you find attractive about Buddhism?
Genuinely show you care and you're interested in what they believe so that
Yeah.
it kind of opens the door.
And now what I'm waiting for is them to say something that I can ask a pointed question. So they say, well, Buddhism believes that all people are good and that, okay, do you believe that? Oh yeah, I think so. So you believe that someone like an Adolf Hitler or a Jeffrey Dahmer is a good person and they just need another chance. And if Hitler had survived World War II, he should have been given another chance. Well, no. Wait, I thought you just said.
Oh.
Now, maybe you haven't gotten to anything about the gospel, but all you've done is cause them to question where they're at now. Maybe that's the furthest you can move them today. Maybe they're not even willing to acknowledge that. Maybe they just, I don't know where Nick is, but.
He just left.
Oh,
Just
okay.
one more thing.
Nick talks about he crashed 13 Cadillacs, total 13 Cadillacs. And in the one of those, they thought he was dead. He was in a coma and he was part of a ring that was cooking meth. And there was about 50 mob guys in that ring. And the FBI had infiltrated. And the day came when they'd gotten all the names and all the evidence and tapes and all that stuff, pictures, and they were ready to spring. And they swooped in and they arrested every one of the people. And they came to the hospital where Nick was to arrest him. And the doctor said, well, we don't think he's ever going to recover. He might, but there's no guarantee, and it'll be months before we know if he's going to improve. So they tore up the warrant on that because they wanted to move forward with the other 49 guys, and they didn't want to delay the trial waiting to see what happened with him. So they went on with the trial. They found these guys guilty, sentenced them to 10, 15, 20 years in prison. And months later, Nick wakes up from the coma and isn't a vegetable. But he needed a lot of rehab and he's still in the hospital. And of all people, a Catholic priest came in and just asked him, is this what your life was made for? Is this what you think your life is all about? And laughed. And Nick couldn't get that out of his head. And his whole life came down to that. For me, it was a very similar experience. For me coming to Christ, I'd been presented the gospel for a month, more than a month, 2 months. I'd asked all kinds of questions, talked about all kinds of things, had been answered questions about the Bible and all that, and I'd come to believe it was true, but I had just started to become popular with a clique at school, and I knew if I committed my life to Christ, it would cost me that clique. And I wasn't willing to pay that price. And I remember it was a teen day in January 1975. We took a trip down to the farm show because we were all FFA kids. On a school bus, 4-hour drive on a school bus down to Harrisburg for the FFA. Left at like 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning to get down there, 8 in the morning, spend the whole day there, get on the bus at 8 at night and get home at midnight. And I wasn't there 10 minutes and I got in a fist fight with a kid and my glasses went flying. And I am blind as a bat I literally had before I had my surgeries, I had 2400 vision. That means I could see at 20 feet what an average person could see at 400 feet. And I'm searching for my glasses everywhere. And one of the kids from school, not a close friend, but friend, says, oh, Mark, your best friend grabbed your glasses, so they're safe. Just find him. And Mark was wearing a blue corduroy FFA jacket. 10,000 other people in the farm show arena were wearing blue corduroy FFA jackets.
You're right.
I looked for Mark all day. And at the end of that day, they were selling jewelry, like we want people to do here. And somebody had a cross, little tiny silver cross on a chain. And I bought it mostly as a rebellion against my parents because they said men didn't wear jewelry. I'm going to show them. I'm going to get some, and I'm going to be a cool guy with a chain, And Mark comes up to me. And he hands me my glasses. I go, where are you? I looked for you all day. He goes, yeah, I met up with this girl and, we were hanging out. I didn't want you cramping my style. So, yeah, I saw you a whole bunch of times. That was kind of funny. You were looking everywhere. And I was sitting right there and you couldn't see me. And I got on that bus for a 4-hour ride. And I stared at that cross. And said, I'm going to go to hell for these people? Am I stupid or what? And that question played over in my mind for 4 hours. And that was the thing that broke the logjam from you getting saved. Not another, they could have talked to me about truth for another 50 years. But until I addressed that logjam, I wasn't gonna take that next step. And so all you can do is take that person the next step. Maybe that's the first step on the road, maybe it's the last step on the road, but you gotta move them one step. And questions are the best way to do that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I always thought you did use the Socratic method. I mean, you always ask us questions. It drives me crazy, but I get the answer and then I remember it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because what you give out freely is often worth exactly that much in the mind of the person who's getting it. You ever seen a kid get a brand new $1,000 gaming system and then just beat it all to pieces?
Mm-hmm.
And what's their first question? Oh, this one's broken. When can you get another one?
Work for it.
Mhm.
Why do they have that attitude?
You don't
Gotten it
appreciate
for
it.
free. They don't value it.
They don't value it. And you contrast that to a kid that had to work and save, and maybe their grandparents gave them $30 for a birthday card, and they hoarded that money, and now a year later, they're going out to buy the thing, and they just raised the price another $30, and they're $30 short. And it's like they're crushed, and now I've got to work another 2 months and save for. But when they get it, how do they treat it? And the same thing is true of the gospel. And if you try to shove it down people's throat, the fellow that led me to Christ had a saying, you were talking about the saying that you gave with the Jewish people. He said, a man persuaded against his will be of the same opinion still. You force me to acknowledge something that I don't really believe, you can force me to do that. But as soon as I walk away, you haven't really changed my belief. A man persuaded against his will be of the same opinion still.
If you watch the debates with Charlie Kirk, he did a really great job of asking questions, and
Yeah.
he expressed a genuine desire to understand where that person was coming from. It wasn't a fake or let me just pretend that I care. Like I could tell just by
Yep.
how he communicated, it was a genuine desire to understand, why do you think that? And it's really interesting to watch.
And then he'd ask a theoretical that was personalized, that would say, does your belief stand up to this situation? And if it doesn't, why not? And he wouldn't specify that, but that was the intent of that question. And very often people would be, oh, I never thought of that.
He did it with transgenderism too. And he would even like break it down, like, so why aren't we letting kids smoke? You know, why not drink or do anything else? So he did good to
Yeah,
difference.
He was good at, like, he had, a lot of times, there were a lot of his people there, and somebody would say something controversial or adversarial, and he would say, no, let them speak. Let them say what they're going to say. Don't boo. Just let them,
and he had a great statement that he did, so we have clarity, but not, what was his other word? But not agreement. We have clarity, but not agreement. You have stated, and I understand your position, and I hope you understand mine. We have clarified where our disagreement is, and you're not willing to change right now, and neither am I. And we can understand at least where each one's coming from, even though we don't have agreement, we can at least see the other person's perspective. And he would often end with that to try to say, this is part of reasonable dialogue. is if we can't agree, at least acknowledge this is what we both believe, and I'm gonna let you keep your belief and you should let me keep my belief. And of course, the left's response to that was a bullet.
That's the core of why he died. They just don't like to talk. And
Yeah.
even when you go and you see the videos of just going in to try to talk to folks, you have immediate 1, 2, 5 people that just stand in front, just, no, don't talk, don't respond to them, ignore them.
I'm part of the South Jersey Writers Group, and in fact, I'm an officer in it. And we just had new people come in as the co-chair people. And the first thing one of the leftists there wanted to do was come up with a rule for safe spaces. And all this rule, and I immediately started saying, okay, well, who's gonna be the enforcer of this? Who's gonna be the one to kick people out when they don't agree with this? Who's gonna determine when that this is hate speech, or this is this, or this is that? Does that mean any disagreement, a person is threatened with being thrown out?
It's opinionated. Yep.
And for now, they backed down. But what matters is that no one feels uncomfortable. Well, who's the no one? The people who agree with you don't feel it. How about me? The fact that there's rules makes me feel uncomfortable. You're not concerned that I feel uncomfortable.
Jordan Peterson talked about that. It's like folks are scared to offend folks, so therefore like be quiet. Like, no, that's the polar opposite of human nature. We should be okay with
Yeah.
offending people, but there's no reason not to talk through it.
Have you seen the reporter that asked him a question about being offensive?
I did see that one. That was.
And he goes, well, you're offending me.
Mhm.
Your questions offend, so you shouldn't have a right to ask these questions, because how dare you offend me with these questions? They're like, well, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
No, you don't. You never think about that.
And then she doubled down and said the same thing. She's like, you got me. I really don't know what to say.
Yeah,
She's
Oh.
honest.
yeah.
It was, yeah.
You know, Dennis Prager had 2 sayings. One of them that you said, he always said, I value clarity over agreement. At least we're clear on stuff, so we get each other's point
Yeah,
instead of just putting one down. And he also says that truth is not a virtue of the left.
no.
No.
It used to be.
Yeah.
It isn't anymore.
I think liberal, but I think a leftist is different than a liberal.
Yeah. Yes.
I have a question on something, a biblical question on something a little different. So if we're
Sure.
redone,
Yeah.
here's my question. I was brought up Roman Catholic, and the Roman Catholics took the 2nd commandment out because they have statues and things like that, about the idols, and they replaced it. They made the 10th commandment. They broke it down. That thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, and all, and all. They made 2 covet commandments. Okay, but can you break the 2 apart a little bit better for me? Because a lot of people don't worship. We think of idols, we think of bowing down to a crucifix, and people do that, but there is a how like an idol can be. Your children could be an idol. Your all kind of different things can be. So can you break down the first, or show me the difference between the first and the second commandment? Because I kind of almost think you can combine them, but they're there for a reason. They're 2 separate ones.
Israel had a problem with specific idolatry until when? When did Israel cease having a problem with idolatry?
After the golden calf.
Golden calf.
No.
No.
Because all through the kingdom age,
Yeah, that's right.
do you think that they didn't have a problem with idols who was on that Mount Carmel? But what, 800 years later, after the time of Moses, who was on that mountain with Elijah?
Oh, the
Prophets of Baal.
The prophets of Baal and Moloch.
Yeah.
How did you worship both Baal and Moloch?
You
Sacrifice.
killed
Sacrifice.
With idols. They set up idols to Baal and Moloch. what does it constantly talk about that they had out in the fields? The sacred hedges, the Asherah poles.
Ezekiel talks about adulterous Israel, like,
So they had a problem specifically with idols, with a visible expression of a false god until when? And when did Israel cease having a problem with that?
Heard it, but I don't know. I can't remember. My father-in-law used to say it all the time, and I just cannot.
what about them stopping having a?
Used to
Well,
say-
they did.
He used to say Israel, that that's one thing they don't have idols now because of something.
What book is it in?
The answer to that is after the destruction of the temple and the 70-year in Babylon. Once they came back from Babylon, they had been surrounded by idolatry for 70 years. And they saw their idolatry and they never again had a problem with idols. There was never from that time to this time a Jewish people who, I'm not saying individuals, but collectively the Jewish people never again had any inclination to dealing with idols. False gods. So what does Ezekiel say their problem is then?
They need a new heart. And it talks about.
And it's Ezekiel 14:3.
Son of man, these men have set up idols in their hearts and put wicked stumbling blocks before their faces. Should I let them inquire of me at all?
So what had they done following the return? Ezekiel's writing during and after the 70-year period in Babylon, when they have forsaken physical idols. What have they done?
They set up idols in their heart.
They have internalized idolatry. They have internalized idolatry.
Yeah, Ezekiel 11, 18. They will return to it and remove all its vile images and detestable idols. I will give them an undivided heart.
But did they get rid of the core problem?
No.
No. So there's the distinction between the first two commandments. The one is this externalism of keeping these physical manifestations of false gods.
Well, that would be two.
That's two.
Okay.
One is the deeper thing of having idolatry of the heart. That my heart is, even if I don't have the physical manifestations, I still, in my heart, worship what they represented.
So one is internal, one is external, is what you're
Yes.
saying. Okay.
Isn't that most people in America today, though?
Oh, absolutely.
Isn't that pretty much everybody? Because how can you really know? when-
Although, again, in America, we also have external idolatry. What is our external idolatry?
Celebrities.
Like entertainment.
Yes, I'm gonna, things, because what is the substantial religion of much of America, at least my generation and a couple after it, even if others don't necessarily continue that. What is the big idol?
Money.
Money.
Now, what is the external idol of money?
Possessions,
Find things, yeah.
ability.
specifically the house that is designed not to be a place to live, but is a
Place of pride.
place of displaying my wealth. I live in this zip code. That's the whole thing that was, what was that TV show?
90210.
Yeah,
Lifestyle.
No.
Rich and famous.
Beverly Hills 90210. What was that all about?
Status.
Beverly Hills.
People who live in this zip code are this kind of people. And I need to move to, and the whole thing was about people who had moved up to that, but they still weren't part of it. Because the car. Do you need a car to make it in America or access to a car?
You need a car to make it in America? Yeah, pretty much so.
Pretty much so. If you live in certain very limited places in center cities, maybe you can get by without it. There's people in New York who do not have a car and take the subway or whatever.
Philadelphia too.
Rural areas that you need
Yeah.
a car.
Like
But
Lynchburg.
even suburban areas, places like we live. It's 2 or 3 or 4 miles. I think I am the closest person to my work at school. It's still a 2-mile walk for me.
You could ride a bike,
I could,
get there fast.
but what's the problem with that?
Weather.
The weather.
I knew a guy that lived in Lindenwold, he rode his bike every day to the ShopRite for almost 30 years.
Yep. But they expect me to show up at work and not be bedraggledly wet and, so yes, you need a car, but what's the but that goes with it?
But you don't need one with all the bells and whistles and all that.
But I don't need one that the nameplate says BMW
Or Mercedes.
or Mercedes or Rolls Royce. But why do I want those things? Because they
Status.
show my status. That's hilarious because I stand there directing buses in, and there are about half of the administrators in our building, and we have way too many administrators. What do they drive in?
Beamers.
White Lexus.
3 in Beamers, 1 in a classic Corvette. What do the teachers drive in? Minivan,
Nissan, Honda,
Honda,
Chevy.
pickup trucks, which are often more expensive than,
Oh, yeah.
but they're a tool that they're using. But why is it this disparity between the administration and the teachers?
They have an image to up.
Yeah.
So there's that external. I have my idol. And I have this internal set of idolatry that mandates that I have that idol. Do you see that connection?
Sure.
And you can have disobey 1 without 2. But when you have 2, it'll always lead you back to 1. If you keep the physical manifestations of your idolatry, sooner or later you will return to that idolatry.
But if you and I were talking and you said to me, you were talking about Jesus, and I said to you, well, my Jesus doesn't do that. My Jesus is this. And you would say, you're right. Your Jesus isn't, because he isn't the Jesus of the Bible. That would be breaking 1, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, that would not be an idol. That would be,
You are not to have any false gods.
Right.
And your Jesus, no matter what you name him.
yeah.
C.S. Lewis does a great job with that in The Last Battle, which is the final book of the Narnia series.
Mhm.
There's been this kingdom that is north of Narnia who has wanted to destroy Narnia for thousands of years. And in the last battle, they succeed. and they invade with a false god. And they dress their god up in a lion suit and call him Takash Aslan. And they say, oh, we've been worshiping the same God, we just have a different name. And they begin to have everyone worshiping Takash Aslan. And then all these people from Narnia, when Narnia is destroyed and the world is ended and everything's swept into eternity, these people who are from Narnia end up not where they should want to go. And they go, but we worshiped Aslan. They said, no, you worship Takash. You just called him Aslan. And this one guy from this northern kingdom shows up in heaven. He goes, why am I here? And he goes, you claim to be worshiping Takash, but in your heart, you really were worshiping Aslan. You just didn't know his name. And so what that's saying is, I can call somebody Jesus, but that doesn't mean I'm worshiping the real Jesus.
Even when they say, my God is nature. You know, I go out, I feel when I'm out hunting.
Or even, yeah, but even the more direct, when they go to some liberal church and they talk about, yeah, I believe in the loving Jesus, or I believe, and they don't even identify it as mine specifically, but what they're saying is this Jesus who's different than the Bible Jesus.
Righteous.
And remember that there are two characteristics of God, and therefore Jesus, who is a part of the Godhead, that always have to be held in balance. What are the two aspects of God from which everything else about God flows?
He's loving and he's just.
Holy.
I'm going to use a different word. I'm going to use his word. He is love, not just loving. What's the difference between being love and being loving? But what is the practical difference?
Say.
God is not loving, technically. He is love.
So he is.
Yeah, it's who you are.
To be loving means there is a separate standard called love, and I adhere to that standard. So I can be loving because there is an external standard of love that I adhere to in some measure, good or bad. That is external to me, and I am dependent on meeting that standard. That God is love says what?
He's the very definition of love.
That standard isn't out there, and God measures up to the standard.
He is the standard.
He is the standard. You define love by God. Not that God meets the external standard of love. Those are entirely philosophically different things. So you can measure Allah as, is Allah loving? And you can argue about that. But God isn't just loving, he is love. He defines, that is a central attribute of his character. But it is always held in tension with
Justice, righteousness.
holiness.
Out of his holiness, he is just.
Now, righteousness, justice, fairness, all come out of his holiness, and to a lesser part out of his love. Why is he fair? Because that's the most loving way to be. But aside from that, he is just because he can't be unjust, because he is holy. But again, it is not that God is holy in the sense that there is an external standard called holiness and God measures up to it. God is the measure of holiness. So what does Jesus say in Matthew 5? Was it 48?
Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
So what is he saying?
God is perfect.
His perfection is the standard.
You need to emulate that.
And so therefore, when you come to Romans 3:23, all have,
Fallen short of the glory of God.
and that word glory, you could change for another word, which is
Standard.
holiness. For all have sinned and fall short of the holiness of God. And if you go to Leviticus, there's a bunch of them, but Leviticus 11:44, which is the foundation which Jesus is rewording in Matthew 5:48. What's Leviticus 11:44?
I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves and be holy, because I am holy. Do not make for yourselves unclean. Do not make yourselves unclean by any creature that moves along the ground. I am the Lord who brought you up out
So
of
what's he saying?
Be holy.
I am the standard of holiness. You need to measure up to who I am.
I also have a note here. 1 Peter 1,
Yep,
15 and 16.
yep, where Peter quotes that. So here's what often happens, and the church is very good at doing this. What does the liberal church do with God?
Too much love.
They define God solely by love. So I had a professor named Tom McDaniel. He was a former missionary to Japan. Maybe he's the reason that Japan is one of the least evangelized countries in the world, because he was certainly did nothing to evangelize them in any measure. Probably drove them further from the kingdom than they were when he started. But he was a total universalist. What's a universalist? There will ultimately be zero inhabitants in hell. And what was his proof of that? Could you possibly send your child to burn forever? Are you more loving than God? If God is loving, he could never send anyone to hell.
I could agree that he wouldn't send his children to hell, but we're not his children.
So what he did was he was taking half of who God is and building his theology around that. On the other side, you have sometimes the fundamentalist. And what's the problem in the fundamentalist side?
So,
God is
Just
holy, holy, holy,
Pharisee.
but no loving there. And so the hard thing is keeping the balance between those two things, is never sacrificing one to the other, is always holding both of them in tension.
would you recommend that those two, holiness and love, are he's 50% each, or he's 100%
And
each?
both, yeah,
So 100% each. Okay.
yeah.
Got it.
He is utterly loving and utterly holy. And again, I think that's one of those things, if you go back to our discussion from the other Tuesday night, that doesn't make sense, because it seems like you've got to be part of one and part of the other. But that's where God violates our understanding of logic.